All right, welcome back, folks, and welcome to the last part in our urinary system series here. Today we are actually just going to be talking about characteristics of urine, and then moving on to talking about the inferior organs of the urinary tract, and then that'll be it. We'll be wrapping it up today. So let's move to again talking about urine. So the first thing I want you to know is that remember, as we learned when we talked about the function of the nephron and nephrology, that your nephrons, your kidneys, remember, have 1,000,000 nephrons per kidney. Remember the nephron structure here with the glomerulus and then the PCT, loop of Henle, DCT, and collecting tubes. Remember, you have 1,000,000 of these in each of your kidneys. And they are so efficient that they're cleaning about 150 to 180 liters of blood per day. Just an incredible amount of blood. But remember, what's interesting about that is you only have about 5 pints of blood, which means you're cleaning it over and over and over. And you might also remember that when we say we're cleaning blood and we say that blood is dirty, that's sort of hyperbolic, because only 1% of what's coming in is actually waste products, which makes sense if you look at how much urine we actually produce then. So over the course of the day, even though we clean about 150 to 180 liters of blood per day, we're only producing 1% of that in waste in urine by the end of the day. So what is urine? So that's what we're going to talk about. The first thing I want you to the first thing that you obviously know about urine is that it is characteristically yellow. And this yellow color is due to a pigment called urochrome. Obviously, the more urochrome you have, typically the more dehydrated you are. You guys have probably all seen pictures of that. Actually, did I have that on the previous slide? Yeah, you could see that here on this slide, right? If you're well hydrated, your urine is rather clear. The less hydrated you are, obviously the dark you are. I have seen urine charts, where they actually show brown urine and they say consult a doctor. Something tells me you will already be at the doctor if your urine is that color. But either way, the yellow pigment is totally normal, safe, and healthy. Because it's actually just a byproduct of hemoglobin breakdown. Your red blood cells are breaking down all the time, and as the pigment in your red blood cells break down, it changes color to this yellowish color. And the more that it builds up, right, it mixes and it actually appears sort of brown. Your urine is also, though, sterile, which is something that most people don't think about. Now, that doesn't mean that I would drink it. However, I'm just one man.
Yeah, shouldn't we, learn by dodging balls that are thrown at us, or...?
That's what this sack of wrenches is for. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
What?
Any other questions?
Oh, my God! Yeah, Patches. Are you sure that this is completely necessary?
Necessary? Is it necessary for me to drink my own urine?
Probably not.
No, but I do it anyway because it's sterile and I like the taste.
Okay.
So I don't know that I'm like Patches O'Houlihan here and I'm going to be drinking my own urine, but at any rate, he drinks it because it's sterile and he likes the taste. The last thing that you should know about urine, on this slide, is that it is also slightly smelly, right? And this is actually due to the urea substance that we took out mostly, again, in the DCT. So urea is what gives it that characteristic odor. A couple other things that you should know about urine is that it is slightly acidic. Now, when we say slightly acidic, remember neutral is a pH of 7, right? You can see that right here in the middle, pure distilled water. pH of 6 is really close, so we're not talking super acidic. I mean, it's the same acidity as saliva or hand lotion. And even like coffee and tomato juice, grapefruit juice, and all that type of stuff is significantly more acidic. So it's not super acidic, but it is slightly acidic due to the presence of hydrogen ions. Remember, we're pulling out hydrogen ions as we move through the nephron. And as you pull them out, they make your blood less acidic, but then necessarily they make your urine more acidic. Your urine is also a little bit heavier than water. Water has a specific gravity of 1, right? It's kind of our baseline. And because of the dissolved solutes that are in it, like salts and obviously urea and potassium, all of that stuff makes it a little bit heavier, which is why, if you're really dehydrated, if you've ever looked at your pee in a toilet bowl, you'll actually notice that it does sort of sink to the bottom of the toilet bowl. So another little interesting commercial break. Yeah, actually, the last factoid that you saw on there, a woman actually held the contest. The radio contest was called "Hold Your Wii" for a Nintendo Wii. This was when the Nintendo Wii was incredibly popular in around 2007, 2008, and the woman kept consuming bottles of water. Was feeling really sick. They weren't allowed to go to the bathroom in order to win the Nintendo Wii. Ended up going home, and she actually died of hydrocephaly. Her brain actually flooded because a little capillary in her brain burst, and water flooded the outer meningeal layer of her brain, which is just crazy. So yes, if you gotta go. All right, last thing that we're going to talk about today then are just the organs we have yet to talk about, all of the organs below the kidney. So we're going to start with the ureters. So we're going to start here with the ureters, and then we're going to work our way down to the bladder, and then finally the urethra, and then we will be all done for today. So what are the ureters? Ureters are just tubes, right? They're just tubes that run from the kidney down to the bladder. They are typically about 10 inches in length. So I usually just tell people, remember, about a foot for the average person. And of course, their job is just to empty. They do pump, by the way, so they do have muscles in them. And they are pumping urine down. So you actually would, even if you were standing upside down on your head, kind of like your esophagus, they would get urine to the bladder regardless. Thankfully, we're normally standing right side up, so they don't have to work that hard. The urinary bladder now is rather interesting as well. A couple things that you should know about it is that it is a collapsible muscular sac. And its job is to store urine. It can store about a half to a full liter of urine when full, which to me is quite amazing. And eventually, as we empty it out, it's going to pump it out. It's actually lined with 3 layers of muscle called detrusor muscle, and actually very similar to the uterus when a woman is having a baby going into labor, right? Your urinary bladder does the same thing, does a very similar thing. It actually contracts, similar to, like I said, labor contractions. So Another thing that you should hopefully remember is that the tissue that makes up the urinary bladder is unique. It's only found in this one place in the whole body. So we learned when we were studying histology in chapter 3 that there's this special tissue that changes shape because it expands significantly without increasing internal pressure. And the tissue is called transitional epithelium. So at one point, it's kind of like, think of it like a rubber band, right? So most of the time, when your bladder is relaxed and not full, right? It's like a rubber band that isn't being pulled on. But then as it expands and fills with urine, right, it stretches, but it stretches in a way, again, where it doesn't increase a ton of pressure. Because if it did, right, if pressure built up in here as it stretched, as the transitional epithelium stretched, right, that would, I mean, think about the pressure on the front of a balloon if you didn't tie it off, right? That you would just be constantly wetting yourself and you'd be incontinent your entire life. And thankfully, we're not. All right, and then finally, we're going to end with the urethra today. So the urethra is, so if we brought urine into the bladder through the ureter, the urethra is essentially the same thing, but on the opposite side. So the urethra is another thin muscular tube that carries urine, but this time it's carrying urine out of the body rather than down to the bladder. And actually, what's interesting, and you can see it really well in this picture here, we're going to label it in another picture coming up here, but there are two muscles that close it off. So these are called sphincter muscles. You have two sphincter muscles. One of them you have control of, and one of them you don't. So as your bladder fills up, this right here is called your internal urethral sphincter. And this one is going to open whether you want it to or not. So the floodgates open when the bladder's full. You have control, though, over the second one, usually around the age of, 1.5, 2 years old. Think about the time you became potty trained. That part of your brain is still developing. That's your medulla oblongata. That's what controls, bedwetting and whatnot. So that part of your brain is still developing for the first couple of years of your life. And then eventually we gain control of that. Now, not everyone does. My sister has cerebral palsy and she still can't fully control that. So she does wet herself sometimes. People in old age will sometimes lose the ability to control that once Alzheimer's sets in. And so they'll wet themselves as well. And that's why they make Depends diapers for elderly people. But that is called your external urethral sphincter. That one that we're supposed to have voluntary control over is that second one. And that's when, when you really have to go to the bathroom super bad, this one's open, right? And this is the one that you're pinching off and keeping closed. You're contracting. And then when you have to urinate, or the scientific word for urinate is micturate. When you have to urinate or micturate, you relax this muscle and then you urinate. So there are some differences, and you can see them here as well, obviously. So here's the urethra for a female. Here's the urethra from here all the way down here for a male. Obviously much longer on a male because it's got to pass through the penis, and it doesn't in a female. So the urethra varies between the two genders in length, location, and what it's carrying. Obviously, again, in length, it's much longer in a man since it's passing through the penis. The average male urethra is about 8 inches in length, and the average female urethra is significantly shorter, right? Here's the bladder. Here's the bladder, by the way, in a male. And in a female, you can see it again. And look at how much shorter it is. Notice it's completely disassociated with the vagina and the anus or rectum here. So 3 complete, separate, and distinct orifices. Men only have 2 distinct orifices, right? They have the anus and then the urethra here. But women, much shorter, there's only about an inch. So 1/8 the length. The location, obviously, you can see in this picture here that for a man, it passes through the penis, but it also passes through this gland. And this gland's going to become really, really important when we talk about different urological disorders, because men tend to have a lot more urological problems because of this gland, and that gland is the prostate gland. So in a man, the urethra passes through the prostate gland and the penis, and in a woman, it passes through nothing. It actually just exits above the vagina. So I want you to know that it's exiting along the superior wall of the vagina. And then remember, in a man, because it's passing through the prostate and because it's also associated with the reproductive system, the male urethra carries urine and semen, while the female urethra is only carrying urine. All right, we only have 2 things left here, and then we are done. All right, we've got the urinary bladder. I want to talk about the the parts of the urinary bladder now and essentially just label all of what we've talked about. So I'm going to start with the ureter up here. Right? We could do directions as well. Remember, what's right is left and what's left is right when you're looking at something. So this is actually the right ureter and the left ureter. And then this entire sac, remember, again, is the urinary bladder. So then, I don't know if you can see, like right here and right here, you can actually see little holes. Now, some people have the misconception by looking at this that the ureter dumps the urine in up the top here, but it doesn't. It actually comes all the way behind the urinary bladder, and it fills the urinary bladder from the bottom up. Thank God. I mean, otherwise you would almost hear like a dripping, a little dripping of urine throughout the day, or feel that internally, and we don't, fortunately. So these are called, because they're attached to the ureter, they're called ureteral orifices. This is the right ureteral orifice, and this is the left. So you can see there's the left again. And they are going to collect urine, and then when you're ready to go to the bathroom, right, you're going to relax this sphincter, which I'm going to label in a second, to open up the urethra. So this pipe is the urethra. And then remember this first muscular sphincter here, and you can't see it because there's a cross section. Remember in that previous picture, you could see it a little bit better. But right here, you can kind of see some muscle tissue. That is the internal urethral sphincter. Not to be confused with another muscular sphincter here at the bottom called the external urethral sphincter. So remember, this one you do not have control over. That one will open as soon as the bladder gets full. And this one you can choose to open, all right? And then last but not least, there is one last term that's really strange. Remember, there's this little orifice here, there's another orifice here, and then there is, I totally mislabeled something here, folks. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go back and fix this, but now I've already created the video. So, sorry, this is the internal urethral sphincter. I did say that, but I accidentally labeled it orifice, and this is the external urethral sphincter down here. This hole is actually the urethral orifice. So we've got a ureteral orifice and a urethral orifice. The terms are remarkably similar. But here's what I want you to know. Because we essentially have three holes, they have a common term. All three of these openings are referred to as something called the trigon. I have no idea why we call it that. I don't know why it gets a special name. It just does. So, all right, we're going to end here with the act of urinating. So the act of urinating, as I said, I hope you enjoy this animated GIF. It's really, really stupid. The act of urinating is called micturition. And like all sensations, when you're going to urinate, when you're going to go through these contractions, that's controlled by your nervous system. And the thing that causes, if you've ever had to pee so badly that it actually, you can feel the contractions, right? It actually kind of hurts and pulses. That's actually caused by your pelvic splanchner nerves, which are probably the funniest sounding nerves that I've come across to date. So, all right, so that's urinating. It is important to note that depending on age, gender, and so on and so forth, we urinate more or less, we retain more or less water, and that's for all sorts of different reasons. So teenage adolescent males have 60% water for their body. Females have only about 50%, and there's a bunch of reasons for this, right? Females have more or have bigger breasts, and there's a lot of fat tissue in those breasts, so obviously that's going to bring the body percentage down. But teenage boys also, because they have so much more testosterone, can put on muscle a lot more easily, and so tend to have higher muscle mass. And muscle is made mostly of water. So that's one of the reasons for the differences. Infants, because they're so small, and they have quite a bit of muscle and stuff compared to their body size, have a lot of water mass. Senior citizens, on the other hand, because their muscles start to break down as they get older, right? Their muscles start to atrophy because they use them less, have a much smaller water composition. So that is it, folks. We have finished the urinary system. I hope you enjoyed learning with me. I enjoyed learning with you. And as always, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments, or you know where to find me. Take care. Bye.